How did a failed artist from Austria rise to control one of the most powerful nations on earth? How could one man, with just his words, convince millions to commit unspeakable crimes? What drove a man from poverty and obscurity to become the architect of death and destruction? This is the story of Adolf Hitler, a man whose ambition, hatred, and propaganda engulfed the world in war, shattered nations, and left millions dead. The rise of a dictator, the fall of a civilization, and a warning for humanity all begins here. Introduction. The shadow over Berlin. Berlin, May 1945. Smoke rises from a city reduced to rubble. Streets lie in ruins. Lives destroyed. Dreams shattered. A city that once thrived now lies silent, except for the echoes of one man's ambition, Adolf Hitler. But how did a failed painter, rejected by art schools, rise to command one of the most powerful nations on earth, leaving destruction and horror in his wake? This is the story of a man, a movement, and the fragility of democracy when confronted with hatred, propaganda, and charisma gone wrong. Took early life, the making of a dictator. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, Austria. His father, a strict and authoritarian customs official, demanded obedience. His mother, whom he adored, died of cancer, leaving him with a profound sense of loss and longing. As a young man, Hitler moved to Vienna, aspiring to become an artist. Twice rejected by the Academy of Fine Arts, he lived in poverty. During these years, he absorbed the toxic nationalism and virulent anti-Semitism that were widespread in the city, forming the core of his future ideology. World War I gave Hitler purpose. Enlisting in 1914, he served on the front lines, awarded the Iron Cross for bravery, and suffered temporary blindness from mustard gas. Germany's defeat in 1918 shattered him. To Hitler, it was not just a loss of war, it was a betrayal, a stab in the back by politicians and Jewish people. 3. The rise of the Nazi Party. After the war, Germany was in chaos. Economic hardship, political instability, and a humiliated population searching for answers. Hitler joined the tiny German Workers' Party, transforming it into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. In 1923, he attempted to seize power in the beer hall putsch. The coup failed and Hitler was imprisoned. But even in confinement, he turned adversity into opportunity, writing Mein Kampf, a manifesto outlining his vision for Germany. Racial purity, conquest, and Lebensraum, living space for the German people. The economic collapse of 1929 gave Hitler the ladder he needed. Millions unemployed, desperate and humiliated found hope in his promises of work and bread, national pride and restored power. By January 1933, Hitler became Chancellor, legally seizing control of Germany. Consolidating the dictatorship. Once in power, Hitler moved quickly. The Reichstag fire provided a pretext to suspend civil liberties, and the Enabling Act granted him dictatorial powers. Political parties were banned, labour unions crushed, and dissent silenced. The Night of the Long Knives was a bloody purge of his own paramilitary essay to ensure loyalty from the German army. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, turned media into a weapon, creating the cult of the Führer and controlling the narrative across the nation. Through propaganda, rallies, and terror, Hitler secured absolute authority. He was no longer just a politician. He had become the embodiment of Germany itself, his followers. The road to war. Hitler defied the Treaty of Versailles, rebuilding Germany's military and rearming the nation. Austria was annexed in the Anschluss, and the Sudetenland was claimed without resistance from Britain or France. The world's policy of appeasement only emboldened him. September 1st, 1930, Germany invaded Poland. World War II began. The Blitzkrieg lightning war swept through Europe with devastating speed. France fell, and Britain faced a relentless campaign in the Battle of Britain. But the war was not just fought on battlefields. Behind the lines, a systematic horror was unfolding, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews, millions of Romani, disabled individuals, political dissidents and others were murdered in an industrial-scale genocide orchestrated by Hitler and his inner circle. The Holocaust, humanity's darkest hour. The final solution was meticulously planned and brutally executed. Concentration camps, death camps, and ghettos became the tools of industrialized murder. Families torn apart, entire communities erased. It was a calculated, relentless campaign of annihilation carried out in the name of ideology. The world watched, often in disbelief, as Hitler's machinery of death expanded, leaving a scar on history that cannot be erased. The 7. Turning tides. The fall of the Third Reich. By 1941, Hitler's ambition reached its peak. The invasion of the Soviet Union was the largest military campaign in history, but overextension, fierce resistance, and the brutal Russian winter led to catastrophic losses. The entry of the United States in 1941 further tilted the balance. Battles like Stalingrad marked the turning point. The once mighty German army was gradually pushed back on all fronts as Hitler clung desperately to impossible victories. 8. The end. Bunker and ruin. By April 1945, Berlin was surrounded. The Soviet army closed in, bombs falling, streets in flames. Hitler retreated to his bunker, isolated from reality, obsessed with final plans and delusions of victory. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide. Germany was left in ruins, Europe divided, and millions of lives lost. The Third Reich, built on hatred and deception, had collapsed. X. Legacy. Lessons from history. The world learned a grim lesson. Unchecked power, fueled by propaganda, hatred, and populism, can destroy nations and humanity itself. The ruins of Berlin, the Holocaust, the millions of lives lost, these are not just memories but warnings. Democracy is fragile, ideology can be weaponized, charisma can be deadly when paired with hatred. Remember the past, reflect on the consequences. Ask yourself, how can we ensure history never repeats itself? Adolf Hitler, the architect of ruin, a story of ambition, horror, and the cost of human failure.